Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it is a feast of Saint Monica. Pray for us. This is a great week for saints. We discussed this yesterday in Italy's Shrines and Wonders, mentioning the fact that, so we were talking about the places where both Augustine and Monica were buried. Augustine, of course, being buried in Pavia, outside of Milan, about an hour south of Milan, and Monica actually buried first in Ostia, and then her relics are moved to Rome, and she is buried in the church named after her son, St. Agostino, in Rome. A beautiful church, and both churches you should visit if you're finding your way up to, for example, the Milan area on the way to the beautiful lakes. Maybe you could stop in Pavia, not Pavia, but Pavia. And then if you're in the Rome area, definitely go to St. Agostino. It's usually not on the tourist map, but it's well worth it, or the tourist pilgrim itinerary. And then give yourself a real treat and head out to the beach country for Ostia and Ostia Antica, a great site in terms of archaeology and ancient cities. Well, let's talk what's happening today in the world right now on August 27th. We are going to be talking with the one, the only Father Mitch Pacwa for our Cultural Connections for 2 segments. And then we are going to discuss postpartum depression and help for postpartum depression. Anne Marie Williams is a mom, and she's a writer, and she's dealt with these issues herself, and she's very concerned about women and how they are approaching this time in their lives after they have children. So her website is for postpartum, not just for depression or psychosis, but what happens in that period after the beautiful baby is born and comes back home to live, and everything changes, right? So we'll discuss with an eye on this case that's going on in Massachusetts, where this mother is accused of killing her 3 children and claiming that she had postpartum psychosis. Now, some very crucial testimony was given by medical experts yesterday who said that they believe that she's still criminally responsible. There's some information that came out regarding what looks to be how she was planning this, and this, of course, is going to be up to the jury to decide. But what we're hearing now is that she sent her husband, and there's videos of her husband at this restaurant picking up a carryout at a place they did not frequent, and that was much further away. And the idea behind it is the prosecutors are saying that she planned it to the detail, down to the last detail, in terms of making sure she had enough time. So the jury is looking at all this. It is heartbreaking. And the other situation that I want to discuss, and once the verdict comes down, now they're saying that closing arguments are going to wrap up today, and then the jury could begin deliberations tomorrow, which could be a verdict next week. We don't know how long it's going to take. But who's speaking up for the children? 3 children were killed. And there are hundreds of women that have gathered daily outside the courthouse in Plymouth to support Clancy, the defendant, claiming that they understand the problems with postpartum depression and it's very severe. I think that's a valid point. However, who's speaking up for the children? We can't ignore the fact that 3 children died. They were brutally killed and their lives were ended. So this is a huge case. And there's also a Catholic angle to it. Well, of course, obviously, pro-life, that's a big angle in this whole situation with how do we help women who are in need. But also, the defendant is Catholic. So we'll discuss with Anne Marie Williams. That's coming up right after Father Mitch at 39 minutes past the hour. Hour number 2 on 2 Cents. I want to share more with you on this huge settlement that was agreed upon by Meta. They are facing massive lawsuits around the country, and this is a huge amount of money. When you look at their yearly revenue, it seems like just pocket change. But we'll discuss in terms of some of the changes they're promising and what people think about this in terms of the experts and also parents. There are parents who are saying that they don't think it's enough, and they're very concerned that Meta is not going to really change after this settlement because, again, even though $18 billion is a huge amount, when it comes to what they make annually, doesn't amount to much, according to some critics. And then we're going to talk with Dr. Cheryl Hughes. Oh, and in that segment on 2 Cents, I want to give you a great resource, especially if you're a parent, especially if you're a catechist, especially if you are dealing with young people on a regular basis and see this issue of media infiltrating their lives. There's a beautiful document that John Paul II wrote many, many, many years ago called Rapid Development, and it talks about media influence. And there's also another document he wrote. There's actually 2 very good ones on media. And we'll discuss those, and I'll give you the links to them. You can just look them up on EWTN or the Vatican News site. But this is evergreen, beautiful teaching from the church on media usage. So we'll share those resources as well. And then Dr. Cheryl Hughes is going to be joining us on a very positive media angle story, the influence of Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen. She has a book, Fulton J. Sheen, God's Great Communicator. Of course, his beatification is coming up very soon in September. EWTN is going to be there, of course. But it's going to be very, very exciting and interesting to speak with Dr. Cheryl Hughes all about Fulton Sheen and his influence as a great communicator. Let's take a look at the forecast this morning on a Thursday morning, the Feast of St. Monica. Pray for us. Dangerous heat in the southwest. We have severe thunderstorms and heavy rain in the northeast and mid-Atlantic. Dangerous heat waves persisting across the southwest through Friday with daytime highs, get this, of 110 to 115 degrees. Heat across the southern plains will briefly ease to near normal by the end of the week. Strong to severe thunderstorms may produce damaging winds, hail, and a tornado or two, and then heavy rain and flash flooding across parts of the mid-Atlantic and northeast, and heavy rainfall threats continuing across the Gulf Coast. Wow, it's 6 minutes past the hour right now. We've got a lot of news to get through, so let's get started. Thanks for tuning in to EWTN's Catholic Connection on Thursday, July. Wishful thinking on my part. August 27, 2026. Here we go. Rescuers continue to scramble to find survivors after devastating flash floods hit the Nepal-Tibet border yesterday. Officials say now at least 332 people have died, but that number keeps rising. Around 1,000 at this point are missing, with the majority being foreign citizens, including dozens of Americans. The flood happening when a wall of water exploded through a mountain valley in the border region, ravaging bridges, roads, and buildings. Nepal's disaster officials now believe a glacial collapse and debris flow was the cause rather than an earthquake, and there are concerns about potential second and third waves caused by major debris in rivers. We'll be talking about this later on this hour. Testimony has wrapped up in the Linsday Clancy murder trial in Massachusetts. Final witness of the prosecution, psychiatrist Dr. Gregory Seethoff, was asked yesterday on the stand if Clancy should be held criminally responsible for the murder of her 3 children.
Doctor, did you form an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether Linsday Clancy on January 24th, 2023, when she strangled her children, was criminally responsible?
Yes.
And what is that opinion?
Yes.
Clancy has admitted to strangling her 3 young children back in 2023, but has pleaded not guilty while claiming she had post-partum psychosis. Again, as we mentioned earlier, closing arguments beginning today. Jury deliberations could begin either later today or possibly sometime tomorrow. Devin Watkins tells us, meeting with the Pontifical Commission for Latin America, the Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV, is encouraging the church there to accompany families that undergo the pain of substance abuse, violence, or poverty.
Meeting with members of the Pontifical Commission for Latin America, Pope Leo XIV upheld the Church's efforts to help families heal from addiction. He thanked the many people from faith-based centers who work for the accompaniment, prevention, recovery, and integration of young people affected by drugs. Pope Leo pointed to 4 bridges that converged at the meeting, representing 4 paths of cooperation. First, he said the Church works closely with international organizations in order to combat the abuse of drugs. Second, the Pope said science and faith form another bridge, since the Church does not want to compete with neuroscience, psychiatry, or public health.
Sino que procura iluminarla desde el Evangelio.
Rather, he said, she seeks to shed the light of the gospel upon it through an integral understanding of the human person. Third, the Church serves as a bridge between all continents as people with common goals come together to share their suffering, hopes, and pastoral enthusiasm. Fourth, the Church and other ecclesial communities employ faith as a common language with which to practice concrete love for those who suffer from addiction. Pope Leo went on to highlight the centrality of the family, calling it the domestic church, which runs through every aspect of efforts to combat substance abuse. The family, he said, is the place where life is nurtured, cared for, and given direction. There is no better protection against drugs than a good family.
Actualmente somos testigos del dolor de muchas familias rotas.
Today, lamented Pope Leo, we witness the suffering of many broken families, whether because of drug use, violence, the criminal recruitment of a child, poverty, or the lack of opportunities that push people to the margins. In conclusion, Pope Leo XIV encouraged the work of all those working in the area of addiction. May the church be the family of all those left by the roads.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has upgraded the Valor Awards given to the Marines who guarded the entrance to the airport in Kabul, Afghanistan in 2021. He spoke at a ceremony on Wednesday honoring the Marines.
Today we're here to look you in the eye and to deliver the recognition you earned 5 years ago.
A suicide bomber attacking the Abbey Gate entrance and killing 13 U.S. service members and 170 local residents. It's happened during the U.S. pullout of Afghanistan under then-President Biden. Earlier this year, the Pentagon determining several awards had been inappropriately downgraded and now accurately reflect the extreme risks the Marines knowingly accepted. The head of Russian foreign intelligence has confirmed he met in Moscow this week with CIA Director John Ratcliffe. Sergei Narishkin says they discussed sensitive matters falling within the authority of their respective intelligence services, and that it was nothing unusual. Some media outlets in the U.S. are reporting that Ratcliffe was warning Russia not to attack any NATO member states. Neither the Kremlin nor the White House has confirmed those reports. And President Trump's order limiting mail-in voting facing a lawsuit by a coalition of Democratic-led states looking to block it. The order directing agencies to compile a list of confirmed U.S. citizens eligible to vote in each state. The Postal Service would then oversee mail-in voting by establishing uniform standards. The lawsuit calls the order unconstitutional. Some U.S. ranchers are opposed to a new proclamation signed by President Trump. The proclamation signed this week, removing tariffs from 300,000 tons of imported beef over the next 90 days with the goal of lowering ground beef prices. And Mark Mayfield tells us President Trump is headlining a fundraiser in Houston today for Texas State Attorney General Ken Paxton.
The Republican is locked in a tight race with Democratic State Representative James Tallarico. Both parties see the race as being key to deciding who controls the Senate. Trump will stay in Houston tonight for an event honoring the NASA Artemis II crew members on Friday. He'll be at NASA's Johnson Space Center to award the crew the Congressional Space Medal of Honor. I'm Mark Mayfield.
And we'll be talking more about this in the 2 Cent segment. Meta is settling in its federal trial over social media addiction. California Attorney General Rob Bonta speaking after the settlement was announced.
We believe the proposed settlement filed today addresses some of the concerns at the core of our lawsuit and that it will force transformative changes necessary to protect our children.
Several states suing the tech giant, alleging it designed its social media platforms, also including Facebook and WhatsApp, to engage children and get them addicted. They also claim Meta misled users about the safety of those apps. As part of that settlement, Meta denied the allegations, but they say they're committed to establishing daily limits and blocks on nighttime use for teenage users, along with enhanced age assurance measures. Meta will also pay over $17 billion, close to $18 billion in that settlement. And with students heading back to school around the nation, a dietitian is offering some tips on packing lunches and trying to keep them healthy. Here's Dr. Margarita Schuch with the Cleveland Clinic, who says kids don't have a lot of time to eat, so keep those lunches simple.
Talk through different options. Maybe we try a different vegetable. Maybe we try a different fruit. It's important to have those conversations with your kids because we never want to assume that they're eating all of it. You want to make sure that they're enjoying it.
And she recommends including fiber and protein, which will keep the children fuller for longer. Crackers, cheese, yogurt, sliced fruits and veggies, always good ideas. And it's always a good idea to have Father Mitch Pacwa on every week, and he's up next. Stay tuned. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. It's a Thursday, 16 minutes past the hour. And you know what that means? The one, the only Father Mitch Pacwa joins us to take a look at news stories through the eyes of the One Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Father, good morning. You know, this trial in Massachusetts has just really caught the attention of the nation and the world. And I was thinking about this from a pro-life perspective, because obviously we want to, and we're going to actually have a young woman now who has a ministry dedicated to postpartum, not just postpartum depression, but dealing with postpartum issues. What's it like after you bring the baby home? She's written on this extensively. She's a wonderful Catholic sister in the Lord. But certainly we want to be concerned about this. This is a real problem for many women, and it's not just some mood or feeling that they're going through. But what I find disturbing is that there's no one out there speaking up for the children who were killed. There's plenty of people out there supporting Linsday Clancy, but the babies are not getting the attention they deserve. What are your thoughts? Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
A couple things. This fits part of the trend that we have in our country, where focusing on the life and the right to life of babies is put in the back burner of concern for the living adults. This is a cultural trend. It shows up in a number of ways. In the perhaps least harmful is the way some people will say, look, I'm miserable in my marriage, and if I can, once I get a divorce, I'll be happy, and then my kids will be happy. No, that's not the way that works. You're focused on yourself, and your kids are a secondary concern.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the story of the Alexanders. I've had them on my show, and they talked about that. They believed that until they saw how miserable they were making their kids, and then they worked themselves through. But the needs for the kids are put back there for the needs of the adults. We see the same thing on a more profound level when people, say, I can't handle another child or to have a child now. This will get in the way of my education, my career, my reputation, a variety of things. And and even to the point that I don't want a boy child or a girl child, so I'll abort this one that I don't want. It's the dignity of the child and the inherent push toward life of a child in the womb is neglected. Now it's gone to another level. And on one hand, and this is something that the various people in the legal system are trying to figure out. There's serious psychologists who are involved in this present trial, and they want to see if there was a psychotic break that would mitigate the responsibility. And this is a very important principle that comes from Christianity and is institutionalized in our law, that certain mental states make personal responsibility impossible. When somebody is drunk and they drive off the road, they're not trying to kill anybody. They're not really fully responsible for murder, which is, intentional, but they were responsible for getting drunk and driving. And so they get accused of manslaughter, vehicular manslaughter, because they were responsible for getting drunk, but not for the actual killing of somebody intentionally. So it's a different charge than, say, first-degree murder when you kill somebody. And that also applies in this legal case. Was she in a mental state that by which she would, not be held responsible? And the complication here is that she induced her husband to leave the house.
Right.
And then you see, then she killed each child, taking them, each one down to a basement to strangle them. That sounded premeditated. And so that's the tension in this case. And what we have going on culturally is that people are saying the premeditation doesn't count because you don't understand what it's like to go through postpartum.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't been through postpartum depression, you don't understand. I would agree with that. I can't understand it. That's part of why I do believe men and women are very different, and they and by their physical structure, women have experiences men cannot enter. There's another kind of dynamic in a woman's body and how hormonal changes affect mood that I cannot understand. I agree with that. But in this, as you said at the beginning, the children are lost.
Mm-hmm.
And, we don't want to be unsympathetic to her mental state. But at the same time, we don't want to justify killing these innocent children.
No.
They were just little kids.
And the evidence that came out, as you mentioned, is I think very compelling. There was the video of the husband at this restaurant, and the restaurant is a restaurant that they did not frequent, and it was a new restaurant. He went to get a carryout, apparently, to pick up food, and it was further away, and so it gave. This is what the prosecution is saying. They claim that she chose this because it would give her more time to do what she wanted to do. And then she also said, according to one of the psychiatrists, she was asked, well, were you hearing this so-called male voice when you were committing the murders? And she said, no, it was my voice. So it's something she said prior to, and then when it came up in trial, it was two different things.
Right.
But I'm wondering, Father, how much... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, here's the issue. Under the law, we hold a drunk who is at a bar and can go home, wants to go home. We hold them responsible for taking a step such as calling for a cab or something, or getting somebody at the bar who's sober to drive them home, having a designated driver, etc. We hold them morally and legally responsible, even in their drunken state, to get help to get home, rather than drive under the influence and make yourself possibly able to kill somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That's under law. And if somebody has postpartum depression and recognizes that I want to kill my children, I am in a dangerous state, I need to tell my husband, I need to tell a friend, my mother, whoever, but I have to tell somebody responsible to get me to help and to keep my children safe from me.
Yeah, she says she had different diagnoses and all kinds of meds that just didn't work. We'll talk more about this with Father Mitch, and also a very, how do we say, challenging situation down in Peru, and the Pachamama resurfacing again. Father Mitch has some comments on that as well. We'll be right back. Father Mitch Pacwa from EWTN joining us every Thursday for our Cultural Connections, and we're talking about a story that is really capturing the attention of the culture, not only in the United States but around the world. The story of Linsday Clancy, claiming postpartum psychosis was responsible for what caused her to murder her 3 children. So, Father, this is going to begin, well, the final arguments begin today, could go to deliberations as early as this afternoon, and then could wrap up by tomorrow, so we could see a verdict fairly quickly. I'm thinking we may have a verdict by next week. Final thoughts on this, and as Catholics, how do we view this, and how can we pray in this particular situation, in addition to, obviously, and we'll be discussing this further in our next segment, helping women and families who are seriously dealing with this problem of postpartum depression?
I think a couple things are going on here. One, is that we also have to pay close attention to the fact that we are, very much involved in dealing with such a situation that we have to help people work through this mess. That this is something that they are trying to work through. People who are going through postpartum. I think that's the point of your guest today. Is that we have to have a strong, clear sense of trying to help people survive that situation. This is not easy, and we want folks who are, involved in, such difficulties to get better. We want them not to be harmed, or we want them to be able to work through the difficulty they have and truly have a sense we are there for you if you have these ideations of being afraid of your children, angry at your children, or you're just going in a state that we will be there. We will help you to develop some of these concerns, to develop a way to cope with these problems. That is our message to you. So that would be very, very important. Secondly, I think to have a sense that, we have to also let people know your solution to your problems is not killing people. Life is very precious. You may not just go and kill anybody, not your children, your spouse, not strangers. You can't go up to a man and, you disagree with him, you think he's doing something wrong, and then shoot him in the back of the head.
Right.
This is where people in our culture are justifying killing in very different ways.
Well, Luigi Mangione has a huge legal fund, people that are still donating to him because they think he's a hero.
See, this is where the culture is saying, killing is acceptable if we think the reason is worthwhile. That has to stop. This is no small issue. And this is where, in part, we have to make a cultural decision to go ahead and do something about this.
Right, which is why we're having Anne Marie Williams on next, because she's got some ideas.
Defending killing is not the way to do it. That's and that's a cultural decision. We have to accept. So this is a very, very important issue, and that's why I think the news of all this is so problematic. We do have too many people willing to justify the death because they don't see another way out.
Yeah. Father, we only have about 3 minutes left, and I want you to address the story that is circulating now. Vatican official and Catholic bishops take part in Pachamama ritual in Peru. This was ahead of Pope Leo's, of course, planned visit coming up to Peru.
Yeah.
A senior Vatican official and 2 Catholic bishops taking part. What do we know about this right now?
The thing that I've seen so far is that these the supporters for Pachamama did a little service, an offering of a sacrifice to Pachamama. That's wrong. There's only one sacrifice we can legitimately offer. Well, 2. One is the holy sacrifice of the Mass. That's the sacrifice we can legitimately offer. And secondly, we can offer ourselves as a gift to Christ and ask our Lord to accept us as a pleasing sacrifice. We don't offer coca leaves to anybody. And this idea of doing that so that Pachamama can do her thing to pray for a healing or whatever the heck it is Pachamama was trying to do. I mean, this is absurd. I believe that we should take care of the environment. I have no doubt of that. We have a responsibility to the environment. But environmental concern is something that takes place because we are using good science to go after the environment and try to figure out what is the best way to deal with environmental concerns.
And Father, this seems to be just the opposite of what the Holy Father has been doing so beautiful at the audience messages, talking about the importance of getting back to the basics of the Mass. Even his audience message yesterday, talking about the importance of liturgy and sticking to the program, and how important it is.
And I tell you, there are, I just was in Cusco a few weeks ago.
Right.
And there's a fantastic cathedral and a beautiful Jesuit church right on the main square. People were coming, and they were wearing, for instance, there was a special Mass for the Bakers Guild, and people were celebrating the gift of being good bakers by going to Holy Mass. And these were mostly, mountain people of Peru, the Quechua people who are descendants of the Incas were actually the rulers and the people of the Quechua, but they were there worshiping. Why are you trying to reintroduce? And I tell you, this is something that comes from well-educated, middle-class people who are pushing it because they have been educated beyond their intelligence, and they're making themselves stupid in the name of trying to promote care for the earth. No.
Father, we're out of time, unfortunately. We have to go, but we need to bring this up again and kind of flesh this out. And also, we'll get your reaction if that verdict comes in next week in the Clancy trial. We'll be right back. Hope you're having a wonderful Thursday, and we continue on conversation on this trial that's taking place and wrapping up, actually, in the state of Massachusetts. Testimony wrapping up in the Linsday Clancy murder trial in Massachusetts. Final witness for the prosecution when the psychiatrist testified yesterday, saying he does believe that she is guilty, even though she was struggling with various mental health issues. She did admit to strangling her 3 children back in 2023, but has pleaded not guilty, claiming she had postpartum psychosis. So let's talk about this and what we can do as Catholics, continuing our conversation that we have with Father Mitch Pacwa with Anne Marie Williams. She is a mom, she's a writer, she's a devout Catholic sister in the Lord. Anne Marie, tell us first of all about your beautiful website, because you deal with postpartum in general. You do address the issue of postpartum depression, but you're looking at life after you bring the baby home, right?
Yes, absolutely. And the main focus, right, that we hear about, almost 1 million people are Googling it a month, is postpartum depression. But I believe that we lack a vision for what postpartum could be. I believe that we lack a vision to understand how this could be a transformative time for women and a beautiful time where, yes, there are challenges. Absolutely, we have to show grit. But then also it's a time for growth, like tremendous personal growth as women, as mothers, as individuals. And then a time to lean into more grace, and we are probably comfortable and used to leaning into.
What is your take on this? Why do so many mothers seem to be resonating with, or at least reacting to, Linsday Clancy's story so strongly, with hundreds gathering outside the courthouse in Massachusetts day after day wearing the pink T-shirts, carrying signs, And you and I were talking during the break, and I also discussed this previously with Father Mitch Pacwa, that what really is heartbreaking to me, in addition, obviously, to the problem of postpartum depression, because it's real, as you mentioned, but the children seem to be forgotten in this. But why is this touching such a nerve, do you think?
I think there's a zoom in and a zoom out look at this, and the zoom in looks like this. Many, many women, far more than we would like to acknowledge or openly admit or think about, have asked themselves the question when they are familiar with this case or even aware of it tangentially: could this be me? Could that have been me? And the reason they're wondering that question is because they have experienced thoughts that frighten them in new motherhood, thoughts that are seemingly out of nowhere and that make no sense to them, that are completely inconsistent with who they are as a person, and they haven't known what to do with those thoughts. Those are called intrusive thoughts. And what most women don't know, what the public generally doesn't know, is that they are very, very common for new mothers, and that on their own, they are not a problem. They are not a sign of pathology. But the second that a woman has a thought that comes into her mind of something terrible that could happen to her baby, and maybe in her imagination it's something that happens as an accident, maybe it's something that happens and it's her fault, either purposeful or neglectful, the second that happens, her very next thought is, what does this mean about me? What does this mean about me as a person? How seriously do I need to take this? And then the worst thought that she goes to next is, am I unsafe to be around my baby? Because here's the deal. In pregnancy, you are already aware of this. In pregnancy, you have a heightened sense of smell. But in pregnancy and postpartum, that's not the only heightened sense you have. Our brains are idea machines. They're always spitting out ideas, possibilities. No matter how remote or random those possibilities may be, our brains are always presenting ideas. But you and I have a filter, and so we filter all kinds of thoughts out as ridiculous and ludicrous all the time. But for a new mom, and it can be a first-time mom, a second-time mom, a fifth-time mom, a 10th-time mom, for a new mom, she is having this heightened sense of awareness and a heightened sense of threat perception, and her brain is always scanning for potential threats to her child. But we don't know that our brains are operating like a kind of like an oversensitive fire alarm, right? If you're baking, your fire alarm goes off, there's no threat, but your brain doesn't know the difference. And so we don't know that it's okay to not pay attention to those thoughts when they arise. We don't know that they don't have to mean anything about that, about us as people. And then we hear a horror story like this one, and we think, oh my goodness, is that me? Could that be me? Or could that have been me? That's the zoom in. Right, that's the zoom in. And I want to be very clear before I do the zoom out. But the zoom in is that intrusive thoughts are not just common, but like I said, they're not necessarily pathological or problematic because they're coming from this place of trying to protect our babies. What we have to learn is that we treat them like a crazy person in a park with a bullhorn, shouting about the end of the world, right? When we engage with our intrusive thoughts, when we try to argue ourselves through them or about them, it's like we're walking up to the crazy person. We're taking the pamphlets. We're maybe even shouting at them, you're wrong. But it's worthless. It's worthless to shout at somebody like that or to argue with it. We can learn not to break our stride. We can learn we don't have to prevent those thoughts from coming, because that's another thing, too, that we worry about as new moms. I need to stop this kind of thinking. And the more that it comes to me, the more worried I become about it. But we can learn, and it takes a great deal of personal and professional support. I want to be clear with that. The longer that this goes on and the more that it occurs, right? So without placing blame on anybody, I want to be clear about two things. One, it's not your fault that you're experiencing intrusive thoughts. And two, that it is possible to learn to deal with them and to not respond to them. So that's the zoom in, right? But the zoom out is the cultural context in which we're living right now. PMAD, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And it's not postpartum mood and anxiety disorders, it's perinatal, because they can occur in pregnancy, they can occur in postpartum. But PMAD, in general, are on the rise, and they are at very high levels. If you look around you in church, and you are fortunate enough to be in a church with young families and young people and babies, every 5 or 7 moms, count off in your head because estimates vary, but every 5 to 7 moms is experiencing distress significant enough to be diagnosable as a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder. And I'll tell you what, too, most often this is happening in secret because of the nature of the thoughts or distress that the woman is experiencing, because she's asking herself questions like, what does this mean about me as a person? And if I tell somebody, she's worried about two things. One, if I tell somebody, are they going to say I'm crazy? And then are they going to take my baby away? And the second thing she's worried about is if I tell somebody, right, because when you go to the OB's office for your 6-week checkup, they give you an Edinburgh Depression Scale. So you're filling out a scale sometimes. And now many pediatrician offices have the same thing. So you're filling out the numbers, right? How often is this type of thought or anxious symptom occurring to you? Mm-hmm. But her fear is, what if I respond and nobody does anything? What if I respond and nobody helps me at all? And we know that there are women, too, who are very afraid of being put on a psychiatric medication as the only response to the distress they are worried about. And they are terrified of a situation like happened with Linsday Clancy, where she's been through a dozen or more psychiatric medications. They are worried about that as well. And then the last part I would say is that even in women who perceive that there's a problem, who know that they need help, they may not trust not just the psychiatric medication, they may not trust people are able to help them. But then we have the biggest postpartum support organization in the country with international reach who use terms like birthing parent instead of acknowledging that only women can have babies.
Right.
And women, especially within the church, that makes them very uneasy, and it makes it hard for them to trust that this is somebody who's going to be able to help them, and particularly in a way that respects their religion.
Wow. Anne-Marie Williams is our guest. She's a wife and mom of 6. She has 10 years of nursing experience, by the way, mostly in an adult ICU setting, and previously served as the National or Natural Womanhood Managing Editor, which is a wonderful publication, and we've had them on many times. She founded the Postpartum on Purpose podcast, and we'll give you the links to that before we wrap up, to help moms love who they become during postpartum. And Anne-Marie, a great points that you're making. So the question is, what do we do? What does the church teach? And what do we do about this? And to me, it's a shame that it took such a horrific case to put such a spotlight on the issues that women deal with after they give birth.
Yes, absolutely. So there are multiple things that we can do, but the 4 that I want to present to women right now, and to present to their mothers and their grandmothers and their sisters and anybody who's paying attention and loves them, are actually very basic. And 3 of them form the core, the first part of every single podcast episode. And they can all start to take place during pregnancy. They can start at any time during postpartum. The single most important one, I believe, is to find and form a grandma tribe. That's what I call it. But a grandma tribe is often grandma-aged women, and they may have grandchildren of their own. They may not, but they have a heart to offer, and they have some time to spare. Your grandma tribe are women who will come alongside you, especially the more children you have, if you've got an older child or an older children, and they will help love on you. So when you are pregnant or you are early postpartum, I want women to be asking this question: who can help me and what can they help me with? Because we think most often in the context of, I need somebody to make meals for me. And don't get me wrong, that's important. But even more important is the experience of older women who we can rely on. It's not enough to have our mom squad of moms who are in the trenches in the same way that we are. We also need the experience and love of older women in whatever ways and capacity they have that to give. So forming a grandma tribe, I believe, is absolutely crucial, particularly if you don't, for any number of reasons, have family support. So forming a grandma tribe is the first thing. Second thing, this occurs in every single podcast episode, and it's called Free Things. And the idea is simply to practice an attitude of gratitude. And by that, I mean, and I know this can sound simplistic, it is not, because what we focus on expands within our field of awareness. Free Things is just thinking about the things that have been made available to us in any part of our life that were offered to us completely free as a gratuitous gift. And it can be noticing very small things. Somebody gave us cookies after Mass the other night, which is very kind and unexpected. It can be big things. my kids played outside with neighborhood kids and had the best time on Saturday night, right? So free things, paying attention to what we have to be grateful for. Next, one small change, because no matter how in the thick of it we are, we can pay attention to what's shifting. Something is always shifting during postpartum. Something that was hard is not as hard. Something that was difficult went away altogether. It's no longer an issue. We grew in some way. There is some form of change. And what can be hard when you're early on is to think, I can't be sleep deprived for the next 18 years. But you're not. You're not going to be sleep deprived for 18 years. So one small change is simply a way to track just gently, hey, what's shifting? What's changing? And then one small change.
We only have about 1 minute left, and I want you to get in your podcast and your website. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to have you on again next week, especially as the trial is wrapping up, and it's going to possibly to the jury today or tomorrow. So I think it's going to be a quick verdict. That's just, I've covered a lot of trials in my time, and I just get the sense that this might be a quick one. Maybe not. It depends. But we'll have you available. Where can we find you? Because your advice is excellent, and you're someone who knows about what she is speaking. Especially you have, in addition, a medical background, which is very, very helpful, I'm sure, to moms.
Yep,
so where can we find you?
Postpartumonpurpose.com. You can find Postpartum on Purpose on any of the podcast players. And on Instagram, I also have an account, and it's Postpartum on Purpose as well.
Yeah. I would like to continue the conversation, though, with you, Anne-Marie, beyond the trial, because oftentimes, and I know this from my history as a news reporter, big flash, breaking news, story, then there's the verdict, and then it goes away, and the problem still exists. So I think it's important to keep at this. So thank you. God bless you for your work. So important. Anne-Marie Williams joining us. Postpartum on Purpose is her website and her podcast. Great information for all of us. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for tuning into hour number 1 on a Thursday. This is the Feast of St. Monica. Pray for us. Pray for all moms. Pray for all moms who are praying for their children who may have left the faith. That's what St. Monica did consistently for years and years. And her son, St. Augustine, is one of our greatest teachers of the faith. Coming up in hour number 2, in 2 cents, we're going to take a look at that big story that came out of California yesterday in the Meta trial. They came up with a settlement, and they agreed, both sides did, they agreed to a settlement, Meta, and 17 to 18 billion. Some are saying it's not enough and that it's not the money that's the issue. It is, are they going to really take these issues seriously? So we'll discuss in 2 cents. And then we're working on getting an expert with us coming up, I believe, in 2 cents tomorrow to discuss this further. We'll take that time at the 15 minutes past the second hour at EWTN Radio Extra to dive into it more deeply. But we're also going to be talking to today, back to a Thursday morning edition on hour number 2, Dr. Cheryl Hughes. She's a Catholic author, speaker, and educator whose latest book is Fulton J. Sheen, God's Great Communicator. So we are looking forward to that discussion. She has authored another book on Fulton Sheen, Convert Maker, in which she explores the remarkable role Sheen played in leading countless souls to the Catholic faith. She's also written books on Catherine Drexel and other saints. Should be a great discussion. Hope you can join us on EWTN's Radio Extra on this Thursday, August 27th. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it is a Thursday morning. Great to be with you on the Feast of the Great Saint Monica. We are going to have a great second hour as well, similar to our first hour in terms of greatness, thanks to our wonderful guests. Today we're going to be talking with Dr. Cheryl Hughes about the influence of Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen on converts. She's the author of more than one book on him, and she's going to talk about his influence on converts, but also about how he's such a great communicator. Of course, many events coming up next month in the Midwest regarding his beatification. EWTN will be there, of course. We'll have gavel-to-gavel coverage, as we say, and I'm sure Peter Gagnon will be mentioning this, if not tomorrow, in the very near future. He's already given us a little bit of a highlight, but it's going to be really wonderful. So many great events to attend and to learn more about this great, God willing, soon-to-be saint. He is going to be beatified, and he's on his way, God willing, to sainthood. Maybe we'll see it in our lifetime. You never know. It does take time. The church takes her time. But you never know. We could see it in our lifetime. And we continue to ask for his intercession, especially for those of us who are in the means of communication. In our 2 cent segment, speaking of communicating and media, we are going to take a deep dive, and we'll do this again tomorrow. We're going to take a deep dive into the Meta settlement, which came out yesterday. Of course, there was this huge case in California, and there's all kinds of pending cases. There's lawsuits, and these media companies, these social media companies, are finding themselves up in in court, I should say, in a lot of different issues that they're facing, and they are looking at some big bucks, but is it really enough to make a dent? And what is it going to mean at the end of the day? So we're going to have a couple of people weighing in. We'll have a portion of the statement from Meta's top legal official. We'll have a statement from a father who's still very concerned. He did an interview with NBC, and he says, look, it really isn't about the money. It's about if anything is going to change. We'll take a look at that story, and that is a lineup for hour number 2 on a Thursday morning. We appreciate your listenership here at EWTN Radio Extra. Before we give you the news, let's give you the weather. The National Weather Service is saying dangerous heat persisting across the southwestern portion of the country through tomorrow, with daytime highs of 110 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat across the southern plains will briefly ease to near normal by late week. Strong to severe thunderstorms may produce damaging wind, hail, a tornado or two, heavy rain and flash flooding across parts of the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, and heavy rainfall threats continue across the Gulf Coast. 3 minutes past the hour. It is a Thursday morning. We appreciate your listenership here in hour number 2 of Catholic Connection on EWTN's Radio Extra. Time to share the news with you right now. A major story we're following for you. Rescuers scrambling to find survivors after devastating flash floods hitting the Nepal-Tibet border on Wednesday. Officials say at least now 332 people have died, while around 1,000 are missing, with the majority being foreign citizens, including dozens of Americans. The flood taking place when a wall of water exploded through a mountain valley in the border region, ravaging bridges, roads, and buildings. Nepal's disaster officials now believe a glacial collapse along with debris flow are the causes rather than an earthquake, and there are concerns about potential second and third waves caused by debris in the river. The Holy Father, meanwhile, expressing his deep sorrow over the loss and widespread devastation caused by flash floods in Nepal. In a telegram sent on Thursday and signed by Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Parolin, the Holy Father commending the souls of those who died to the clemency of the Almighty, offering his heartfelt condolences to the bereaved. He also assured all those affected by the disaster of his spiritual closeness and prayed for the emergency personnel engaged in the ongoing search and rescue operations. The telegram concluding with the Holy Father's prayers for God's assistance and protection upon the people there. Devin Watkins tells us, meeting with the Pontifical Commission for Latin America, the Holy Father encouraged the Church in that part of the world to accompany families that undergo the pain of substance abuse, violence, or poverty.
Meeting with members of the Pontifical Commission for Latin America, Pope Leo XIV upheld the Church's efforts to help families heal from addiction. He thanked the many people from faith-based centers who work for the accompaniment, prevention, recovery, and integration of young people affected by drugs. Pope Leo pointed to 4 bridges that converged at the meeting, representing 4 paths of cooperation. First, he said the Church works closely with international organizations in order to combat the abuse of drugs. Second, the Pope said science and faith form another bridge, since the Church does not want to compete with neuroscience, psychiatry, or public health.
Sino que procura iluminarla desde el Evangelio.
Rather, he said, she seeks to shed the light of the gospel upon it through an integral understanding of the human person. Third, the church serves as a bridge between all continents as people with common goals come together to share their suffering, hopes, and pastoral enthusiasm. Fourth, the church and other ecclesial communities employ faith as a common language with which to practice concrete love for those who suffer from addiction. Pope Leo went on to highlight the centrality of the family, calling it the domestic church, which runs through every aspect of efforts to combat substance abuse.
In other news this morning, of course, another big story we're following for you, and we talked about it last hour, testimony wrapping up in the Linsday Clancy murder trial in Massachusetts. Final witness of the prosecution, psychiatrist Dr. Greg Lee Seehoff, was asked Wednesday on the stand if Clancy should be held criminally responsible for the murder of her 3 children.
Doctor, did you form an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether Linsday Clancy on January 24th, 2023, when she strangled her children, was criminally responsible?
Yes.
And what is that opinion?
Yes.
Clancy admitting to strangling her 3 young children in 2023, but has pleaded not guilty while claiming she has had post-partum psychosis. Closing arguments are expected to begin today. Jury deliberations could begin later today or Friday. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth upgrading the Valor Awards given to the Marines who guarded the entrance to the airport in Kabul, Afghanistan in 2021. He spoke at a ceremony yesterday to honor the Marines.
Today we're here to look you in the eye and to deliver the recognition you earned 5 years ago.
A suicide bomber striking the Abbey Gate entrance, killing 13 U.S. service members and 170 Afghan residents. This happened during the U.S. pullout of Afghanistan under then-President Biden. Earlier this year, the Pentagon determining several awards had been inappropriately downgraded and now accurately reflect the extreme risk these Marines knowingly accepted. The head of Russian foreign intelligence confirming he met in Moscow this week with CIA Director John Ratcliffe. Sergei Narishkin says they discussed sensitive matters falling within the authority of their respective intelligence services and that it was nothing unusual. Some media outlets, though, are reporting that Ratcliffe was warning Russia not to attack any NATO member state. Neither the Kremlin nor the White House has confirmed those reports. President Trump ordering limiting mail-in voting faces a lawsuit by a coalition of Democratic-led states looking to block it. The order directing agencies to compile a list of confirmed U.S. citizens eligible to vote in each state. The Postal Service would then oversee mail-in voting by establishing uniform standards. The lawsuit calling the order unconstitutional. Some U.S. ranchers are opposed to a new proclamation signed by President Trump. That was a proclamation signed Wednesday, removing also tariffs from 300,000 tons of imported beef over the next 90 days and with the goal of lowering ground beef prices. And President Trump, as Mark Mayfield tells us, meanwhile, is headlining a fundraiser in Houston today for Texas State Attorney General Ken Paxton.
The Republican is locked in a tight race with Democratic State Representative James Tallarico. Both parties see the race as being key to deciding who controls the Senate. Trump will stay in Houston tonight for an event honoring the NASA Artemis II crew members on Friday. He'll be at NASA's Johnson Space Center to award the crew the Congressional Space Medal of Honor. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Meta is settling in its federal trial over social media addiction. We'll have more on this coming up in 2 cents. California Attorney General Rob Bonta speaking after that settlement was announced yesterday.
We believe the proposed settlement filed today addresses some of the concerns at the core of our lawsuit and that it will force transformative changes necessary to protect our children.
Several states suing the tech giant, alleging it designed its social media platforms, also including Facebook and WhatsApp, to engage children and then get them addicted. They also claim Meta misled users about the safety of the apps. As part of that settlement, Meta denied the allegations, but is committed, they say, to establishing daily limits and blocks on nighttime use for teen users, along with enhanced age assurance measures. Meta will also pay some $17 billion plus in that settlement. President Trump, not a fan of the Canadian government.
They are one of the worst countries in the world to deal with.
Yesterday on the Glenn Beck program, President Trump said the tariffs Canada is placing on the U.S., well, he said they're absolutely insane.
They have taken advantage of the United States for many decades, actually. They charge tariffs that are unbelievable, like on milk, 400%.
Yesterday on that program, Trump saying they have been ripping off, as you heard, America for years, and it was time to finally do something about it. A judge is now intervening, as Scott Carr tells us, in the fight between Texas and Minnesota over the extradition of an ICE officer accused of wounding an illegal immigrant earlier this year in Minneapolis.
Reporting a crime. On Wednesday, a Texas federal judge shot down Minnesota's request, clearing the way for Castro to be released from a jail in Texas. Governor Abbott had previously said he's not going to extradite Castro until Minnesota repays millions of federal dollars lost to fraud in the state. I'm Scott Carr.
With students heading back to school around the nation, a dietitian is offering some tips on packing those lunches and trying to keep them healthy. Dr. Margarita Shook with the Cleveland Clinic says children do not have a lot of time to eat their lunch, so she's recommending keeping it simple, balanced, and to include something your children will definitely eat.
Talk through different options. Maybe we try a different vegetable. Maybe we try a different fruit. It's important to have those conversations with your kids because we never want to assume that they're eating all of it. You want to make sure that they're enjoying it.
She says they should include fiber and protein, which will help keep them full for longer. She also says crackers, cheese, Greek yogurt, sliced fruits, and veggies are great. In addition to healthy sandwiches, they're all good options to stay away from those sugary snacks. Thousands of fans are flocking to the Dollywood theme park in eastern Tennessee to pay their final respects to the late Dolly Parton. She died unexpectedly on Tuesday, leaving her millions of fans devastated. Yesterday, fans from around the country driving up to the 160-acre theme park to pay tribute to Parton and leave flowers and mementos and, of course, at a memorial wall outside the park. Dollywood is the largest employer in the Appalachian country, where Parton grew up and employs about 4,000 people. And forecasters say a tropical wave in the Atlantic Ocean could become Tropical Storm Dolly. The National Hurricane Center says a large tropical wave of low pressure emerged off the coast of Africa this week and has a high chance of becoming the next tropical depression. The next predetermined name on the Atlantic tropical storm list just so happens to be Dolly. Atlantic storm names are established years in advance. Flags across the U.S., meanwhile, are currently at half-staff for the country music legend Dolly Parton, again, who passed away Tuesday at the age of 80 years old. And finally, in our news segment, almost at 13 minutes past the hour, Rory O'Neill tells us you might spot something spooky in the sky this evening.
It's been called an almost blood moon, better known as a near total lunar eclipse, when the Earth's shadow covers most of the moon, turning it almost red. The phenomenon will be visible from coast to coast, but it won't peak until about 12:15 a.m. in the east, closer to 9:15 Pacific time. At its bloodiest peak, about 96% of the moon will be in shadow. I'm Rory O'Neill.
It is a Thursday morning, August 27th, and we come back. We are going to be talking about the amazing Archbishop Fulton Sheen, soon to be beatified. Author Dr. Cheryl Hughes, she's also a speaker and educator, tells us about how he's a great communicator and is also still a great help to those considering coming into or back to the Catholic Church. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. Great to be with you on a Thursday morning, August 27th. This is a big story, another big story we're following for you. You probably heard all about the lawsuit involving the social media giant Meta. Well, they happened to settle yesterday. There was this lawsuit that was going on in California. Big story. And they settled, and they're going to have to pay 17, some people say it's as high as $18 billion. It is extremely important that we take a look at this, especially when we look at what our church teaches us about proper media usage. So here's what they have to do, and we'll have more on this. This is a result of several states suing the tech giant, alleging it designed its social media platforms, as we reported in the news, also including Facebook and WhatsApp, to engage children and get them addicted. They also claim Meta misled users about the safety of the apps. As part of the settlement, Meta denied the allegations, shocker, committing to establishing daily limits and blocks on nighttime use for teens, along with enhanced age assurance measures, and they're also going to pay $17 to $18 billion in that settlement. So there were many parents, especially, who have been following these lawsuits, including this suit that was occurring in California and wrapped up with the settlement. I want to play this clip of a father being interviewed by NBC. His child was greatly impacted by social media in terms of addiction and other problems. And here's what he has to say and why he's not impressed with the settlement. Take a listen.
You have been outside the courthouse for some of Meta's other trials. What's your reaction to the fact that they've settled this massive case and that all of the evidence will not be made public?
Well, that's the big thing for us, too. It's not so much about the money. I think that's an important part in the long term. There was a civil suit that was prevailed by the plaintiff for around $6 million against Meta. That's the California case just a few months ago that I attended to in Los Angeles. At the same time, the New Mexico attorneys general filed suit and won $350 million, and I believe the judge actually awarded another $500 million on top of that. So this is the third case that that Meta has lost, and the big thing for us in fighting this fight is trying to get the information out. Because what they're telling the public and what they're actually doing behind the scenes are completely two different things. And the evidence that I saw come out in the Los Angeles courtroom was quite damning. And this isn't necessarily about a free speech issue. I know a lot of the Net Choice and some of the other lobbyist groups that are getting paid by Meta to infiltrate some of our politicians are using that as a crutch. But this is about product design. This is about a company building a product that's pushing out to our young people in this country and the world, for that matter, that's really not safe. And the parents can only do so much, right? It's certainly our responsibility to make sure we're keeping track and doing those things, but we also have to provide a safe product for our kids to use in this country, whether it's a car, an automobile, bicycles, these laptops, the technology. Every company in this country has the duty to provide products that are safe for consumers. And right now, the tech industry and social media companies specifically are unregulated. And it's time for some change, and I think that's what's happening now.
There is also a video statement given by the top legal officer from Meta. We'll share a short clip on that. This is something I think that's worth really reading more about. And we're also going to talk about the church's teaching on media. Of course, I've always mentioned what the Catechism has to say in the teaching on the use of social communications, which is very helpful. But there are a number of different documents that came out from John Paul II specifically, and also many World Communications Day statements that are very helpful for those who are dealing with young people, all of us really struggling with media addiction and media influence. Do we have that other clip, Richard? Okay, we're trying to get a clip for you in the meantime. So let me just share with you those documents that I mentioned. The one that I love, well, I love them both, but this is a message of John Paul II for the 38th World Communications Day. It was entitled "The Media and the Family, a Risk and a Richness." The media and the family, a risk and a richness. And what I love about our church is that the teachings are timeless. So you really need to take a look at this one. Message of the Holy Father, John Paul II, for the 38th World Communications Day. Dear brothers and sisters, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to do a couple of quotes before we play that soundbite. The extraordinary growth of the communications media and their increased availability, this is 2004, by the way, 22 years ago, has brought exceptional opportunities for enriching the lives not only of individuals but also of families. At the same time, families today face new challenges arising from the varied and often contradictory messages presented by the mass media. The theme is a timely one this year. Again, this is 2004. For it invites sober reflection on the use which families make of the media, and in turn on the way that families and family concerns are treated by the media. So he's covering both aspects here. This year's theme is also a reminder to everyone, both communicators and those whom they address, that all communication has a moral dimension. As the Lord himself has said, it is from the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. Matthew 12:34-35. People grow or diminish in moral stature by the words they speak and the messages they choose to hear. Think about how appropriate this is. And again, brothers and sisters, this came out in 2004. Yes, of course, we had the internet back then, 22 years ago, but we didn't have as much influence in all these different outlets. There were some, but certainly not as many, because especially all these social media outlets exploding after that point 22 years ago. Thanks to the unprecedented expansion of the communications market in recent decades, many families throughout the world, even those of quite modest means, now have access in their own homes to immense and varied media resources. These same media also have the capacity to do grave harm to families by presenting an inadequate, listen to this, or even deformed outlook on life, on the family, on religion, and on morality. This power, either to reinforce or override traditional values such as religion, culture, and family, was clearly seen by the Second Vatican Council, which taught if the media are to be correctly employed, it is essential all who use them know the principles of the moral order and apply them faithfully. And that goes back to Vatican II's Inter Mirifica. So in addition to seeing what Meta is going to do, and we have that clip now from the legal head at Meta, we as Catholic Christians need to always see what the church is teaching us about these issues. And there are beautiful, evergreen statements and documents and teachings on which we can rely and should rely. This particular one that I've shared with you, again, is the World Communications Day Statement of John Paul II from 2004, The Media and the Family, a Risk and a Richness. Let's take a listen now to the head of the Meta Law Department on what they're going to do. Now they're all about helping family and teens. Why does it take money and them going to court for them to do these things? Why didn't they do these things before? Take a listen.
Our new time limit commitments, night mode features, and usage limits during school hours set the right path forward for our whole industry. As a parent, I'm proud both of the work Meta has done to protect kids historically and of this new groundbreaking agreement.
You're proud? Well, where were you when this first started, when all these problems were occurring? And you're still denying it. You're still denying it. Well, we'll see how it works. We are going to catch up with Donna Rice Hughes, who's an expert in this area, who's been following all these cases, and she works in media awareness for families. And we'll see what she says. But I don't know. I think it's great that they're being taken to court. I think it's great that they have to pay money. Technically, if you look at the amount of money they earn, hundreds of billions of dollars a year, $18 billion is a lot. But at the end of the day, it's more like pocket change for them. But at least they're being brought to task, and these situations are being brought to light. Now, we will see what happens with these new rules and guidelines and protections they claim that they're implementing. They're promising to implement. They have to implement as part of the settlement. But they're also trying to get other social media outlets to do the same thing. So we'll see where this goes. But all of this, again, is a reminder for us, not just kids, not just high school kids, college kids, students in grade school, little babies. All of us have to be very conscious of how we take in the media and whom we believe, to whom we listen. For us, it always starts with Jesus and his church. So the rapid development, another document by John Paul II, and also that World Communications Statement from 2004. The media and the family, a risk and a richness. We'll be right back. Dr. Cheryl Hughes is in studio with us this morning. She is taping with the lovely Janet Williams for Women of Grace, which will air, the programs will air right before the beatification of Fulton J. Sheen. We're so excited about all these different events, and especially having Cheryl with us this morning. She's a Catholic author, speaker, and educator whose latest book is Fulton J. Sheen, God's Great Communicator, but she's also written another book about Fulton Sheen, Convert Maker, where she explores the remarkable role Sheen played in leading countless souls to the Catholic faith. Well, Cheryl, what a great time for you. My goodness, you must be beyond excited about all these Fulton Sheen events and the beatification. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's just been fantastic. All of a sudden, we're topical again.
Right.
So, yes, it's very exciting. I'm going to be in St. Louis. I can't wait. And lots of good people are going to be there as well. So it's just something finally coming to fruition. When I started my book, I had no idea when he was going to become beatified.
What is it about? I mean, there's so much we could discuss. Of course, his use of the media. He was such a talented communicator, just amazing, and had amazing ratings and went up against some pretty incredible, talented communicators that he, for example, I think he was up against, can't think of that, Milton Berle, I think he actually competed with.
Milton Berle, yes. And one year even Office, I Love Lucy.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah, and he beat them ratings-wise, so his gifts were amazing. So let's talk about the convert maker, though. What do you think it was about him, obviously his communication skills, that helped so many people come into or back to the Catholic Church?
Well, one of the things he said about converts is what you need is kindness, kindness, kindness. And I think what he's relaying there is really to love the individual. He had tremendous love for God's people. And wherever he met them, whether they were high or low, whether they were beggars or millionaires, he loved them all and wanted them all to be closer to God. And so I think it was that personal love that somehow comes through to him. The people in the television audience at home during his long programs of Life is Worth Living felt like he was talking directly to them in their living rooms. That he was actually sitting down with them. So somehow, maybe some of it is in the technique of it, though he said there's no particular technique, but he had just fabulous eyes and a great voice.
Right.
And he also had this uncanny way of making things that are terribly confusing or could be too technical. He could teach that because he always started from something that was really simple and then backed into the greater theology of what he was trying to get across.
So walk us through the book, because you have testimonies in there as well, correct?
I do. There are 8 main converts in that particular book, and they're all different. Chesterton said that the church is like a big house, and there are 100 doors, and everybody comes in it from a different way. And I think in looking at these various converts, they were at a crisis in their lives. And suddenly, somehow, whether Sheen reached out to them or somebody said, you need to get with Bishop Sheen, he was able to calm their fears and to give them something to hold on to, and that was the love of Jesus Christ. So he was very, very astute and intuitive about people. For instance, when he was talking to Hayward Brune, he said, who was a journalist in New York City, very popular fellow. Why do you want to talk to me? He said to Sheen. And Sheen says, I want to talk about your soul. How many people want to talk about your soul?
Right.
Very, very amazing. That would be almost the first thing. Or when he knocked on the door of Fritz Kreisler and his wife in New York City, the great violinist, he just blurted out, would you like to take instructions to the church? I mean, that was the first time he'd ever met him face to face.
Wow.
And they're still standing in the vestibule of his apartment. And he comes out with that. And then they surprised themselves by both husband and wife said, yes, we would like that very much. So,
what about Claire Booth Luce? What happened with her and Fulton Sheen?
Oh, she is an amazing person. She was at the nadir in her life. She was even thinking about jumping out of a window of a high rise. And
wow.
4 of her friends had done that. So, those things are catching. So somehow the Holy Spirit got a hold of her and suggested that she call this priest that she knew. At the time, she was a congresswoman. Her daughter had just died the previous year. Her mother had died. Her brother had died. She felt like she was completely alone. Her husband was kind of wanting a divorce. They were the power couple, but they weren't always exactly faithful to one another. And she was just at the bottom of the pit. And so this gentleman that she called at 2 a.m, she said, I'm so sorry to bother you in the morning. He said, he's a Jesuit priest. He said, I think you need to see Fulton Sheen. So Fulton Sheen called her and invited her for dinner. And so she got there, and he said, well, during dinner we won't talk about religion at all, and afterwards I will talk for 5 minutes, and then you can ask all the questions that you want, and I'll see if I can't answer them. And so they're talking after dinner, and he says something about the good God, or that God is good, and she just leaped up out of her chair and said, good? How could God be good if he's taken my daughter from me? And in that moment, Sheen says to her, "Your daughter has paid the price of your redemption." Wow. It's stunning. It's absolutely stunning.
And how soon after that did she become Catholic?
Pretty quickly, within the year. And they remained very, very close friends. Very close friends. When he was having open heart surgery, one of the oldest people to ever have that done, she knew about it, and she said, "I'm surprised he has a heart. He's been giving it away all these years."
Wow, that's powerful.
So yes,
we know him as a speaker and a broadcaster, obviously as a pastor and a bishop. But he also, speaking of that, was first and foremost a priest and a shepherd, right?
I think everything he did was grounded in that. I sort of looked into Melchizedek, who is referenced usually at the ordination of young priests, and he really is a type and figure of Jesus. We see that. Becoming a priest was something that he had always wanted to do. I was a young boy. They used to play Mass. You know how kids can do that. He had 3 brothers, and they would play Mass, and he always insisted on being the priest. He knew from the very beginning. Now, he didn't say that out loud to his parents, but he did confide it to the Virgin Mary, who was every bit his mother as Julia Fulton was. Oh. He was very familiar with her and shared with her all of his secrets and desires. And she was with him throughout the rest of his life in a way that was just magnificent. He visited her as often as he could in Lourdes. He went there 30 times. I think he went 10 times or so to Fatima, but it was at Lourdes where he felt particularly close to her. And he wanted her to show him a sign of some kind, and a very specific sign. So he's challenging the Virgin Mary.
Okay, hold that thought. Caleb, we're going to have people tune in because I want to hear this, but we have to take a break. There's the music. Okay. What a fascinating conversation we are having with author, speaker, presenter, of course, Cheryl Hughes. She's a PhD. Cheryl Hughes, Archbishop Fulton Sheen. The title of the book is Convert Maker, and it's published by our friends at Ignatius. We'll be right back. So grateful for our time with Dr. Cheryl Hughes, her beautiful book from Ignatius Press, Archbishop Fulton Sheen, Convert Maker. Again, Ignatius Press, you'll also find it at the EWTN Religious Catalog. And how grateful are we that she's going to be taping several episodes of Women of Grace with Johnette Williams, which will air before the beatification coming up in just a matter of weeks in September. So we'll be covering that as well. Of course, we'll be hearing from our head of studios, EWTN's Peter Gagnon, to talk more about those details. So you were sharing a beautiful story, and we'd like you to finish. You kept our audience on the edge of their seats, as we say in radio. So do continue, because this is amazing.
This really is amazing. I couldn't have made this up. If I tried, I couldn't have made this up. So he's been there several, 9 days. He's done the novena. He said his last Mass, and the day is coming to an end. And no little girl, no white dress, no white roses. So he begins to walk towards the gate. And as he's, sees it at some distance off, he said, "You better hurry up, Mary." Well, you can imagine. He slows down, walks very slowly, because he doesn't see any little girl yet. And just before he gets to the gate, he said, "You better hurry up, Mary. I'm almost out the gate." Suddenly, there is a little girl of 12 wearing a white dress, giving him a rose.
No way.
He writes it in his autobiography. It's got to be true. It is just a beautiful story. And she just sort of appeared out of the dark. It was fabulous. I mean, just fabulous. And he did that many times. But, if you think about it, it's a particularly cheeky kind of move to challenge the Virgin Mary. So
I could just see this good Jewish mom say, "Well, you think I can't do this? I'm the mother of God. I think I can handle it, but I'm going to make you wait a little bit," right?
Yeah. I mean, we've been on the edge of our seats getting to this denouement here, but he was beginning to panic that maybe Mary had left him, and wasn't going to be there, but she was there forever. And he was dedicated to her twice, by his mother at 4 days of age, by himself at his own 12-year-old confirmation, and then he dedicated his priesthood to her at his ordination and gave the Saturday Mass, all of his Saturday's Mass, for her intentions. So he was very, very close to her in a way that was so beautiful, and that it just struck me as so typically American and cheeky to challenge the Virgin Mary, and that wasn't the only challenge he gave her. He, again, wanted to know that if he would be able to save some souls. He hadn't been doing it because he was Bishop of Rochester, and he was so busy with administrative stuff he hadn't actually been spending very much time on converts, which he thought if a soul is not saved, then nothing is saved. So he goes to Lourdes, and he's depressed. Nothing's sort of happened. He's at the bus station getting ready to go down, and a young woman gets off the bus, and she's obviously been crying and is quite distressed. And he said, excuse me, but I can see that you're very distressed. Is there anything I could possibly do for you? And she looks at him, recognizes him as a priest, and says, there's nothing you can do for me. Besides that, I'm not a member of your parish. So it turns out she actually was Catholic. He said, are you running away from something or someone? Turned out to be, bingo, exactly what was going on. And so he asked her if she would stay for 3 days and let him pray with her and talk to her. And that night that he met her, she was actually just between buses, was getting off of one, and another hour and a half or so would get on another one, proceed on her journey. She wasn't going to Lourdes. But he got her to stay at Lourdes for 3 days, and at the end, of course, he heard her confession and gave her Holy Communion. And it turned out that the bus she was supposed to get on went off the mountain road and killed everybody on board. I mean, it's just uncanny.
Wow.
How something like that could happen. But these things happened to him time and again as he dealt with people.
So that, in a sense, that was an answer to his prayer for, again, his main interest was converts and saving souls, which is incredible the way God worked in his life. What do you think his greatest gift was? You in your book say the greatest gift was finding lost sheep, and you just gave a great example of that.
He was a great and holy man. As he loved people, I think that was his gift. He loved everybody, because when you love everybody, you're loving Jesus even more. He was trying to become conformed to him more and more and more as the years went on. And it wasn't always easy for him. He got quite held up in Rochester, where he was only for, I think, 34 months, really not even 3 full years, away from winning converts and trying to make Rochester a poster child for Vatican II Catholic churches in America. But I think it's his love, and that really comes through.
Yeah. He had a relationship and a friendship with Pope St. John Paul II. I wonder if many people know that.
That was really fascinating. John Paul II partially learned English by listening to his tapes, listening to Fulton Sheen. So he would, he would listen to them. He would, switch it off, try to say it, try to get his emphasis, try to get his wording, and what have you. And yes, so they became quite friendly during Vatican II. They were both there. Sheen went to every single meeting. I think Wojtyla did as well. And so they saw one another quite a bit there. Wojtyla tried to get the Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith to consider sending money to Poland for seminary. They didn't have any priests, and at this point they're still under the sway of the Soviet Union. So it's it was hard to have priests there. So he said, we need you. And so she tried very hard to get them to change the definition of mission territory, to change it from a geographical destination like Latin America or Asia or Africa to make it where the need was the greatest. And he thought that Wotila's need was tremendous. So,
what I find so fascinating as well is the timing of the beatification, the way God, it's all in God's providence. But if we think about, we're coming off of the beautiful Eucharistic experience that we've had the last several years, Eucharistic Congress, all kinds of different events and processions, and of course now we have a United States Pope for the United States of America who's from the Midwest, and so there's so many connections here. And with the exposure this is going to get, media will be covering this for sure. This is a very big issue, a very big story, because he was so well known, because he was a TV personality. You can't help but wonder, Cheryl, how many people, in addition to those who've already admitted that, in addition to your book, and people like, say, young people now who say that he's one reason that they're interested in the Catholic Church, how many more, with all the coverage, not only in EWTN but secular outlets, could possibly come into the Catholic Church because of his influence? Because they will be hearing and learning about him and probably looking him up online if they're not familiar with his ministry.
Well, I think that's true. He won many converts from who listened to him on the radio and later who saw him on Life is Worth Living. And we don't know those numbers. He was credited with winning 42,000 converts. And I think that's actually a low statement. So I think there'll be a number of converts out of this, because once you meet him, one of the things he said was that when you realize that Jesus is truly God, then every question mark or doubt you might have had about the Catholic Church, all that goes away. Because if you think that Jesus was God, and Jesus founded the Catholic Church, then you must be in the Catholic Church.
Right.
I mean, you can't be honest with yourself if you don't join. So I think this is going to have a tremendous effect. I already know that there are children in my parish whose name is Fulton.
Aw.
So,
Yeah.
It's out there. Even Bishop Barron did not start doing a holy hour until younger priests, sort of the next generation after him, who had discovered Fulton Sheen, were doing the holy hour. And now Bishop Barron, bless his heart, also does the holy hour. I didn't really mention his dedication to the Eucharist, but that holy hour.
Oh, that was a big
shaped
deal
his
for
life.
him.
Yeah, shaped his life. He did it every single time.
Yeah.
There's a funny story where he was traveling and very, very tired. And so he stepped into a parish church, and the priest was there, and he said, "May I have my holy hour here in your church?" And he said, "Fine." And so he immediately fell asleep and woke up exactly an hour later. So he wondered if he had actually, met his holy hour obligation, and I think he decided that he had. In the meantime, the priest had locked up the church, and he couldn't get out. So there he is wandering around, and he finally found a window that he could crawl out, but then he fell into the coal bin.
Oh, my gosh.
So I think that was his penance for
falling
sleeping.
asleep. Well, it's comforting to know that these great saints or soon-to-be saints have similar experiences. I always think about St. Teresa of Avila, my patron, who said that she would get distracted and start counting the bricks on the walls. So he always makes you feel a little bit better that they're human, right? And that they didn't start out as saints. One of the things I find so amazing as a media person, my background is in media and journalism, is that he was able to reach so many people during such a tumultuous time in our country with all kinds of craziness going on. And you're not only talking about, obviously, post-World War II, but you're getting into the 60s with the Vietnam conflict and don't trust anybody over 30 and just all kinds of issues with the push for birth control and the confusion over Vatican II. And yet there he was, those evergreen messages taking hold.
He was a traditionalist, though he did think the church should put more emphasis on the poor. So if we're not a poor church, we will become a poor church. If we're not for the poor, we will become a poor church.
Poor church. Mm.
So he was very keen on that. It's just a privilege for me to have written this book and to have come close to Fulton Sheen. So I
imagine as a fellow writer, because I know that I'm brought to tears. For example, when I was writing my latest book on St. Francis, and this is a year of St. Francis, my husband and I have the blessing of spending a lot of time in Italy and in Umbria. and I learn more about him and his dedication to the Eucharist and the impact he's had on people. And I can't tell you how many times, or I'll stand in front of a piece of artwork, whether it's here, Catholic religious art, or over in Italy or somewhere else in Europe, and I'll just be brought to tears. Or if I'm researching or writing a column with the gifts of our church and the saint. It must have been extremely satisfying, but also emotional for you to do this book.
It was emotional in various places. I mean, I just cried my eyes out over Claire Booth Luce and her daughter. The child was killed. She was a junior at Stanford and was killed in an automobile accident after having spent the weekend with her mother.
Oh, wow.
And she didn't know any prayers when she heard that. You know, like the worst thing a mother could ever hear is that your daughter had passed.
Mm-hmm.
And so she went down to Old St. Mary's, where her daughter had taken her in the day before, and just to kneel and say a prayer, because her daughter was quite religious. All she knew was the Our Father.
Oh.
So she just kept saying it over and over.
Mm.
So it was such a sad thing, and and beautiful that he could bring her into the church and give her peace of soul, which was one of his books.
And helping her deal directly with that grief and not let her get lost. Cheryl, what a fascinating conversation. Thank you for your excellent work.
Yeah.
Dr. Cheryl Hughes in studio with us this morning talking about her beautiful book, Archbishop Fulton Sheen, Convert Maker, from Ignatius Press, and she's taping several episodes of The Women of Grace that will come up in the next few weeks, and we'll let you know when they air. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for tuning in to hour number 2 of EWTN's Catholic Connection on our Radio Extra app. What a discussion. I was just telling Richard during the break that this is something that we want to re-air again as we get closer to the beatification, because Cheryl brought out so many amazing points, and we'll probably have her back on before then as well. But just so people can hear it, again, and kind of contemplate what this amazing man of God did and continues to do when people call on his intercession. So just story after story after story. And many of the people who are speaking at events that will be taking place during the beatification coming up in a few weeks, they're folks who experienced Fulton Sheen obviously long before he died, and they're saying in their talks, if you go online and you see some of the speakers, the influence he had on their either entering, returning to, or growing greatly in their Catholic faith. So this is a very, very big time for Jesus and his one holy Catholic and apostolic faith. So we'll discuss this further, I'm sure. And even with Peter Gagnon tomorrow, who's joining us on the Inside Word, because EWTN is going to be there. We also have the lovely Vanessa Denhagarmo joining me to talk about her wonderful course at the Guadalupe Radio Network Academy. And then wrapping up with my paisan, Susan Di Bartoli. She joins us in the Radio Extra Hour to talk about her new book, all about the woman who was the biggest support in the ministry of the amazing Padre Pio. Have a great Thursday. St. Monica, pray for us. Talk to you tomorrow. Ciao, ciao.